most people know what they should do, eat better,
Yes.
move more, like prioritize rest, but knowing
Yes.
just isn't enough to create
Yes.
action.
Mm.
The brain resists change because it loves efficiency and it loves routine because it's it doesn't have to exert.
Hi there, and a warm welcome to the Habit Nerd podcast. I'm Dr. Bree Hearn, host and general nerd about all things habits. Over my 20 plus years working as a writer, educator, researcher, keynote speaker, and coach, I've realized that habits influence everything from our health to our productivity and even our relationships. It was Aristotle, in fact, who said we become what we repeatedly do. On this podcast, you'll learn from inspiring experts as they share the habits and systems that help them live happily, healthily, and to achieve enormous success in their chosen fields. Thanks for being here. I do hope that you enjoy the episode. Hi there, Habit Nerds, and a warm welcome to today's episode of the Habit Nerd Podcast. Now, I am beyond excited because being the Habit Nerd Podcast, can you believe we have our very own, for the first time, habit expert? Her name is Dr. Gina Cleo. Dr. Gina is one of the world's leading experts in habit change and well-being. With a PhD in habit change, she's also an assistant professor at Bond University on the Gold Coast. She's an accredited dietitian and she's the founder of the Habit Change Institute. Gina is passionate about turning cutting-edge science into simple, practical tools to transform our productivity, health, mindset, and lifestyle habits, and this is my favorite, long term. Her research has been published globally and she's been featured across more than 250 media outlets. Gina, no surprise, is a sought-after keynote speaker and she's a panelist at national and international conferences. Just last year, Gina released her best-selling book called The Habit Revolution, which further established her as a leading voice in the field of habit change. So my audience would be able to sense my excitement and hear it in my voice, I hope. A huge welcome to you, Gina, and thank you for spending time with us on the podcast today.
It's a pleasure, Bree. Thanks so much for the intro.
So let's dive into our questions, Gina. What does a habit expert have as a habit that serves you and why?
Oh, I've got many habits that serve me, but I would say one of the primary ones that I love having is a regular bedtime routine.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I believe that sleep is one of the, if not the greatest foundation to our health and well-being. And
Mm-hmm.
ever since I've been stricter with my sleep schedule, everything in my life has improved. My energy levels, my concentration, the way I eat, everything. So from my work to my socializing to my exercise, everything. So I would say that would definitely be one of the best things I've done in terms of my habit change.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really comprehensive one. So it's something that you've been able to embed that you see is having a positive spillover into lots of other aspects of your life. So what is the habit, Gina? Is it a consistent time? Is there a routine pre-bed? Can you help us understand a bit more?
Yeah, it's so I've decided that I want to get into bed. I'm an early riser, so I go to bed pretty early, around
Mm-hmm.
8:30.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got a little alarm that sets off at about 8 p.m.
Okay.
And that just signals like, okay, it's time to wind down and really get ready for bed. So
Mm-hmm.
when I hear that little alarm, I've got all my technologies off. I'll have a shower and I'll do all my bedtime routine stuff. I take my time doing a little face mask or whatever it might be, and I'll slide into bed. I'll do a gratitude practice or just something to help me wind down. But,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of hours before that, it's really started earlier because
Okay.
I've dimmed all the lights. Um, I'm not talking about anything that's too sort of inflammatory. Like I'm doing
Mm.
all the other things, all the sleep hygiene things, I guess, that
Mm.
help me to get a better night's sleep. I've really reduced or cut down and out really my alcohol intake. I don't have caffeine later in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that I've done and implemented to get me to have a better good night's sleep. And also that time is really important.
Mm.
With that getting a good night's sleep, we know from research that going to bed on time and waking up at the same time every
Mm,
day is the
mm,
best thing that you can do. So
mm,
everything that I do really works around the timing.
That's a huge, huge and timely and helpful reminder. So habits that feed into the habit, I suppose, habits throughout the day
Yeah.
to feed into the backwards mapping, the sleep habit. Yeah, thanks, Gina. That's a really, important reminder for all of us. And we haven't had that habit for a little while, but certainly, definitely appreciate the reminder of, the very comprehensive flow over effect that good sleep has on, so many elements of our lives and work and relationships and everything. Gina, the the system that supports your habit we've already sort of said, but is it the same on the weekends as on weekdays for you? Do you try and the system looks similar to maintain a 7-day commitment to the sleep?
The idea is to, yes, we know that we can't catch up on sleep, and
Mm.
the routine really does need to be same time every day, which is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting because I actually hate routine, which is just so
Mm.
ironic of a habit
Mm.
researcher. I feel suffocated with routine. I have ADHD, and so I'm just like, do not pin me down to a schedule. I just want to do what flows in the moment. But if I am not, I guess, socializing on an evening on the weekend, then yes,
Mm-hmm.
my routine is absolutely the same. My friends
Mm-hmm.
also know Gina likes to be in bed by 9 p.m., like at the latest. So
Uh-huh.
if we're going out for dinner or something, it's normally we'll
It's an
start
early
around
dinner.
5:36. And so, yeah, I
Yes.
can still get to bed on time. And I'm grateful most of my friends now have children and everybody's sort of on the same wavelength with getting to bed nice and
Mm.
early.
Mm.
It's very rare that I will like have a blowout and be up till pretty late. It might be for a special occasion, of
Mm.
course I will. And there's always
Mm-hmm.
flexibility, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make. Um, yeah, and it's also just a reminder of kind of that social proximity, isn't it? That, you're surrounding yourself with people who might
Mm.
support the same kind of, life ideals and be happy to, support you going to bed early. And yeah, it does help if they've got the similar idea. And I love that idea of, life comes before everything. So, if you get
Yeah.
invited to a great party or there's an event on and yeah, flexibility is key. Really interested in you saying you hate routine for a habit expert, though.
I
Um,
know.
so, do you find then that it's an almost some self talk that you have to have around the routine being important to serve you, despite it not being something that feels particularly comfortable for the way your brain works?
Yeah, I just know what it's like when I wake up the next day and I haven't had a good night's sleep, and I
Mm,
hate the feeling.
mm,
I really value productivity and I
mm,
value feeling good in the morning because that's when I
mm,
like to exercise and sort of start my day on a
mm,
good footing. And when I haven't had a good night's sleep, I'm very prone to just having like a couch day and not
mm,
getting those things done. And
mm,
so I value that more than anything. I value that more
mm.
than watching one more episode of Netflix or scrolling on my
Yeah,
phone or
yeah,
drinking alcohol. And so it's really not that difficult.
yeah.
I think I can easily get swept into, if I'm having a great conversation with someone, let's say someone's around for dinner or something,
Mm,
I can easily be like, oh, it doesn't matter. And, next minute it's sort of 11 p.m.
mm,
But again, that's the flexibility that I'm totally okay with. It's
mm.
just not going to be an everyday thing.
I think that's a really important reminder. Um, Gina, we know you know better than me that habits are the silent architects of our lives, but many of us struggle to do what we know we should do. What can you help us understand what the reasons are for this? And maybe if you could share a couple of examples from your own work.
Yeah, 100%. We don't have a knowledge problem. We have a behavior problem, which is exactly why I was interested in studying habits in the
Mm,
first place. I was a dietitian and I knew all this stuff, but I just wasn't able to implement it. And it was so
mm,
frustrating.
mm.
Most people know what they should do, eat better,
Yes,
move more, like prioritize rest, but knowing
yes,
just isn't enough to create
yes.
action.
Mm,
The brain resists change because it loves efficiency and it loves routine because it's it doesn't have to exert cognitive energy or mental
mm-hmm,
load to do that. And so our
mm.
brain's like, "Hey, I'm busy doing all this other stuff. Like, let's not change the routine here."
Yeah.
The new habits take up more energy. So unless we make them easy and rewarding and repeatable, we are going to keep reverting to that path of least resistance.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
as well, a lot of the things that we want to do compete with something else that might give us more dopamine. So, for example,
Mm,
getting a good night's sleep or like going to bed early competes with screen time a lot of the time. Screens
yes.
give us lots of dopamine, a lot more than the idea of going to sleep does.
Mm,
Also, like things like alcohol and smoking and all these other things, they give us dopamine. And
mm,
we love dopamine. It feels
mm,
great, it's
mm.
exciting. And so we will chase those things more than the things we should do. There is a lot more dopamine in chocolate than there is in kale. And so
Celery,
it's gonna be,
yes.
yeah, it's gonna be a lot more tempting to have
Mm,
those processed foods, for example.
mm,
You asked about an example. I worked once with a woman who was trying to start a meditation practice daily, and she kept
mm-hmm,
saying, I just need to be more disciplined, I need more motivation. But
mm,
when we broke it down and explored it, I think her expectations were just a bit too high. She wanted to do 20 minutes, no distraction, total silence. And we broke it down to a 1 minute breath check while the kettle was boiling,
mm-hmm.
or the same thing while she was in the shower. And that, these tiny little shifts made it so much more sustainable. And she eventually grew into her practice naturally.
Mm.
But we just changed the starting point and made it a lot more achievable. And yeah, once we do that, because starting's the hardest part, if we can make the
Yes.
starting point much easier, the rest does flow. We get this beautiful inertia.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for stepping it out. And I think the example really helped illustrate what you mean there. So the so a couple of things. The example of doing it for 1 minute while the kettle's boiling or while you're in the shower, is it easier because our brain has just got so much pattern and routine already embedded? And as you say, we're really tired, we're working and dealing with 100 different parenting things and social things and whatever that trying to embed something that seems almost a bridge too far, our brain will just say no, like there's no capacity left. So is the methodology there around stacking it onto something that's already quite routine based and already embedded that we don't need to think about? And is it that it's 1 minute and not 15 minutes that is
Yeah.
key?
Yeah, it's both of those things,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
It's reducing it right down from the 20-minute goal to just like starting with 1 minute, and then we increase that over time. And so one
Mm,
minute's a lot more achievable for the brain. We can do one
mm,
minute of anything, really.
mm,
And also, yes, attaching it to the kettle, it's something that she's already doing. She doesn't have to like sit in total silence and create this like sacred space for the meditation. It's just like, hey, you're standing here anyway. Just do it now. And so the brain then starts to associate, okay, kettle with breath work, and there's a lot more of a flow in attaching something that we to what we're already doing, rather than starting something completely new in a new environment. And yeah, that's going to
yeah,
take longer.
okay. Yeah, so it sort of makes that neural link for the person. The the fact that you said you worked with a woman who wanted the meditation practice in the first place, how important is it to, if we don't have an expert with you working one on one, which would, be an enormous privilege, what is the benefit, if any, to interrogating why that habit's important in the first place? Like that woman, did you work with her to find out why meditation was important to her as something that she wanted to do? And then did that help guide the steps that you took in trying to support her with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so many times when people come to me with this long list of goals. And when we break down the why, I think we knock down half the goals because actually it's not as important, or they're doing it
Mm,
because someone else thought it was a good idea and it doesn't actually fit in with their values or their intrinsic motivation to want to do
mm,
something like that. And a
mm,
lot of times it's actually maybe like sometimes just changing the goal. So a lot of people are like, I just want to cut out chocolate. And it's like, do you want to cut out chocolate, or do you just want a better relationship with chocolate?
mm.
And sometimes, yeah, having those reflective conversations it changes everything.
And it's much kinder to ourselves, isn't it, to have a better relationship with chocolate rather than cut it out
Yeah.
altogether? Because then, the self efficacy of when you do have the chocolate and then, oh, I said I was going to cut this out and sort of starting that, negative
Mm,
self talk can be really, yeah, I recognize that in myself for sure when it's sort of too all or nothing.
yeah.
And the last thing I want to pick up in that really great example is you said that the woman who started to embed 1 minute of mindfulness or meditation in the shower or while the kettle was boiling, is there a reward dopamine hit there that she's sort of showing up as the person that she said she was going to be? Is part A to my question. But part B to my question is, at what point do you start seeing the benefits of what you're doing and that be reward in itself?
Yeah, so part A, absolutely. She started to see herself as someone who meditates, who does breath work. And that
Mm-hmm.
self-efficacy or the belief in herself
Mm-hmm.
was able to fuel her and motivate her to
Mm,
increase the goal and to keep going. And she started
mm-hmm.
to identify with it. It became part of her identity, not just part of what she did, but part of who
Yes.
she was.
Yes.
And that was really important and
Mm,
something that we worked on very intentionally reflecting on together. So
mm-hmm.
she still had a habit tracker she would tick off every time she did her 1 minute. It still was rewarding because she still got that dopamine hit from keeping her promise to herself and
Mm,
also ticking it off on a habit tracker. They both of
mm,
those things give us a beautiful dopamine hit and a nice
mm,
reward.
mm.
And the second part to your question, you're going to have to tell me again because I forget.
Yeah. No, I suppose it's the difference for me between, and I'm glad you brought up, tracking or streaking or, when you're able to see the ticks, lining up and sort of the self-feedback loop that you get, okay, I'm on track, I'm doing well. But that is separate to me than the benefit of her understanding what the meditation was doing for her as a reward.
Yes, I mean everybody's going to be different, but I think in her case, it was the keeping the promise to herself was much more rewarding than the
The
meditation at the start.
mm,
It probably shifted into the meditation being the more, I guess, beneficial thing.
mm,
But I don't know, that's a really hard thing to measure as well. I think
yeah,
because when she came to me, she was really frustrated that she just couldn't do this practice. And
mm,
I think giving somebody the self-belief and that self-efficacy is one of the most incredible gifts that you can
yeah,
give someone because it
mm,
it starts to translate into other areas of their life. It's not
mm,
just I can meditate. It's I can do hard things. I can change
mm,
my behavior. I can look after myself.
mm,
And that's extremely powerful because they start, that belief system becomes an identity, and that
mm,
identity starts to affect how we behave in all areas of our life.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really lovely. And it's almost, the integrity of doing what you said you were going to do is such a lovely reward,
Mhm.
isn't it? Yeah. And I like that reminder that even though I've asked you what your client's experience was, your answer to me is very important that you don't actually really know because that's inside her head. So that's
Yeah.
an important reminder, isn't it? And I think that's why, I mean, this space of habits, as you understand much better than me, people are so interested in it, and yet there are still books being published constantly about it, and there's still, it's still a really kind of ripe area for people to read about and to learn about, which means that we still have habits that we want to embed that we haven't done yet. And we still kind of have this self reflection of why is it that I cannot stick to that habit in particular? Or,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think just the reminder that you've given us that this is quite individual, isn't it? That we can call on the science and that the evidence can be settled to a certain extent, but that people are really different and people's brains are motivated by different things.
Big time. Yeah. I've got
Mm.
a client at the moment who I often try to work with positive rewards rather than negative consequences for
Mm.
doing something.
Mhm.
But his brain doesn't really work with positive rewards anywhere near as well as
Oh, it's
negative
so interesting.
consequences. And
Mm.
so I got him to think of a charity that he would really dislike to support. So this is a client I work with in America, and he said,
Uh-huh.
"Okay, I want to work with a charity that supports gun laws." I'm like, "Cool, we
Oh,
can work with that."
wow.
So now every time he does his unwanted habit,
Mm.
he will donate a significant amount. It's an amount that he chose, which is quite a lot, but he will donate that to this charity. And interestingly, he hasn't had to do it one time. We've
Wow.
got these amazing sort of accountability systems between us and these habit trackers that I can see what he's doing and all of that. But it's been this pain point that he just doesn't want to support it. And so he's like, no, I'm just not going to do it.
Oh,
And that's a
that's
that's a
so
totally different
interesting.
brain to someone else who would be like, hey, like I want, for
I
me,
need
for
a pat
example,
on the back.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to get a good night's sleep because I value that and that's enough for
Yes.
me.
Yes. Yes.
So
Oh,
yes,
that's
brains are
so
fascinating.
interesting. They are fascinating. I love that. I mean, I have heard that a similar idea of like consequence rather than reward. And, I think it's in Atomic Habits or something, maybe James Clear's work in some aspect where it's about the guy who wants to go to the gym, and if he doesn't go, he has to give his friend $50.
Hmm.
And I prefer your example because it's more value laden, isn't it? So, your client in America, is really kind of feels sick about gun laws. So,
Yeah.
supporting gun violence. So,
Yeah.
we get that, don't we? Because that's, that it has to be important enough. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's such a great example. That's such a great example. Gina, if somebody wants to instill a new habit, say we're almost at the end of July in 2025 at the time of recording, what is important for them to understand to give them the best chance of success?
I would say one of the biggest downfalls that I see with trying to implement a new habit is people trying to change a habit that's too big or they're trying to do too many at once.
Okay.
And this idea of starting small
Mm-hmm.
is magic, but it's
Mm.
really actually hard to do. It's
Okay.
such a gracious and merciful thing to do for ourselves, but it never feels like it's enough. 1 minute of
Right.
meditation feels insignificant.
Right.
But what we're actually doing is we're laying down such important neural pathways. We're creating self-efficacy, which is the number one predictor of success.
Mm.
We're doing so many great things from a neuroscience perspective, not just 1 minute of meditation. We're actually
Mm-hmm.
doing such wonderful things. And I think if we just keep that in our mind, it helps so much to not resent those really little changes. A few years ago, for example, I started powerlifting. I don't know why. My body's not made for powerlifting, but it was a fun adventure at the time. It's one of my random hobbies. I did it for a couple of years, but when I first started powerlifting, I was at this new gym and my coach wanted me at the gym 3 days a week at 5 a.m. So I had started for a couple of weeks, really enjoying it. Wasn't in the habit of doing it yet, but getting into the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a cold. And so I was sort of out for another week or so. But what I did is I would still get up, I'd still put on my clothes, I'd still drive down to the gym. And then as soon as I got there, I would drive back home and I would get into bed. Yeah, and what I found is after, when once I felt well again, I was already in routine to start, like to continue going to the gym because I didn't break the habit of getting there. I didn't work out. I wasn't training, I didn't do any of that. But I did something so small. I knew I couldn't say no to doing it. It was easy enough for me to do, and it was fine for me to do it. But that laid the foundation for my brain, or it created a stronger neural pathway in my brain so that when I was ready to exercise again, I didn't have to restart the habit. I was already in flow. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is so important. It's like, no, the smallest things that you do consistently, they are the ones that create the biggest changes. It's not the other way around. It's really about consistency, making it so, so achievable. And yeah, doing it regularly, we know through research that that results in much better outcomes than just trying to do like occasional big, big things.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting story. And it's the reason I find that so interesting, Gina, is I totally get, of course, break it down to its most smallest, most, achievable chunk. And I can imagine I've certainly resonate with that feeling of really, what's 1 minute going to do? Like 1 minute, that's not going to do anything. So let's not bother about that at all. Whereas actually, you've reframed that. It's not about the 60-second habit,
Mm.
it's about what it's teaching yourself and, mapping that new neural pathway and making that really, embedded. But the 5 a.m. driving to the gym and not actually going into the gym and turning around the car and going home back into bed. At what point is that almost, and I don't mean to disrespect you here by any means, but could that be a little bit, is that behavior sometimes dangerous that we are too rigid to stick to a routine instead of just taking the day off to stay in bed and hoping that the next day is better? Like, I'd like you to
Yeah.
talk to that brain, kind of fuzz that I'm having over if that was me, the decision I would make if I was trying to be as close to sort of best practice for the habit, I guess.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And it's a great question. I think for me, I was just working within my capacity. I was
Mm-hmm.
completely able to do it and it wasn't a
Mm.
problem for me. I'm
Mm.
also like always experimenting with habits because that's just what I do as a
Literally
habit
a habit
researcher.
expert,
Yeah.
yes.
And there's definitely, that last week I also had a cold. And I mean, I get a cold like once every 5 years. So these are probably the only two times I've ever had colds.
It's
But
good
I took the
data for
whole
you,
week off.
though.
Yeah. I took the whole week off. I didn't do anything. And I was completely okay with that.
And you're back at the gym this week now that
Yeah,
you're
I
well?
am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So
I
you
think
were
that,
able to start again.
oh yeah, for sure. But because this is, going to the gym's a habit I've had for a long time now, so
Mm,
it's easier. Whereas the powerlifting habit, I was only just starting to
right.
establish it.
And it was new,
Um,
yes.
but there would have been absolutely nothing wrong with me taking a rest and doing nothing at all. That's totally
Mm,
fine. The observation would have just been that when I restarted again, that I would have been starting, again, rather than
yeah.
having a pre-established habit. I think it
Mm,
just helped me realize that we don't have to do the whole habit for it to be habitual. You just need to start
mm,
because our brain, once you start, the momentum takes over and the rest happens. So
mm,
we only actually need to do the very beginning of a habit. And I think
mm.
that's what I was sort of trying to experiment with at the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really worthwhile experiment. And maybe I'm a little bit, I don't like the word triggered, but maybe I'm finding that a bit difficult because I've just gotten over a cold and had a week off the gym.
Hmm.
Um, and am very kind of, even as my alarm goes off at 5:30, I'm typically at the gym at 6. Still, even this many years in, even this many, I really enjoy the gym. It's a very much embedded habit in my life as well. That guilt creeping in and then thinking, what will this mean next week when the alarm goes off, and the fear of turning that alarm off when I'm not sick?
Mhm.
Like the worry that I would get closer to that identity of somebody who doesn't go to the gym on a cold morning
Yeah.
without the quote unquote excuse of being unwell.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's completely natural. Going to the gym, although you enjoy it and it's a habit, it still takes effort.
It takes effort, yeah,
Yeah,
particularly
it's
in a cold
still
Melbourne,
exactly.
0 degrees.
It's a lot more effort than laying in a warm bed, for sure.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think it's
right.
normal to feel that, but I think it sounds like you value movement more than you
Absolutely.
value being sedentary. So although the fear might be there, I don't think it's something that would ever take over and you'd be a completely sedentary person as a
No,
result.
and that's a really that's an important reminder for myself and for listeners that we can always check back into what our values are telling us to do, and if it's an either or conundrum, you probably will choose the one that feels more like yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, and if that happens to be a good habit, then that's as in something that nourishes you, that's a bonus, I suppose.
Yeah, for
um
sure. Going back to one of your other questions, though, is can we be too rigid and too habitual? Definitely.
mm,
There's something
hmm
called habituation, which is
okay.
we're just too habitual and we become quite rigid and therefore become quite anxious when then we're not able
Mm,
to continue doing the things we've always done.
mm.
People might experience this when there's a change in environment. I know a lot of people experience it during COVID lockdowns. They might
Yes,
experience it when they're on
on
holiday, like they don't have
holidays.
their structure and routine. That
Mm,
is problematic for sure because we want to be able to have flexibility and adaptability. So there's
mm,
definitely a balance between being too habitual and
mm.
being habitual.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction to make. Thank you, Gina. And that idea of that almost constraining inflexibility that, you would feel like, oh, what's the point of anything then? Like that would be a dangerous mindset to get into, wouldn't it? If you just couldn't ever. I really remind myself sometimes of this idea of it's okay, just don't miss twice.
Hmm.
Like it's okay to miss, but maybe try and not miss twice. And so it's
Hmm.
just sort of tomorrow's a new day. And, you know, um, I would imagine certain personality types struggle with that more than others, which is
Yeah.
you know, um, my fear base around that's probably something more about my personality than, habit formation in general, which of course,
Mm.
you would understand. um, Gina, this has been hugely helpful. Is there any final messages for our audience? And then if there isn't, I would like people to access more of your wonderful work. So we'd love to learn how to do that.
Oh, thank you. I think my final message would be you're not stuck with your brain. No matter how long you've been doing a habit, no matter how, resistant it feels, you absolutely can change all of your habits. By
Mm,
virtue of neuroplasticity, our brains are made to be rewired and they are rewiring all the time. So you just need
mm.
the right tools, really. Where can people find me? You can find me on my website, which is drginacleo.com. On there's plenty of free resources. I have a free habit masterclass you can sign up to. I also do run online courses and I do plenty of like corporate speaking events. And I've got a book called The Habit Revolution. I'm also on social media, mainly on Instagram, and my handle is at Dr. Gina Cleo.
Oh, thank you so much, Gina. I will put all of those in the show notes, and I've already ordered your book actually, so I'm waiting for
Oh,
that to
cool.
arrive.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
Thank
I
you.
need to endorse your 5-day masterclass too, which I did a few weeks ago when I first came
Oh,
across Gina's work, and that was highly worthwhile. Certainly to dip your toe into some of the main kind of principles around this work. And so I would certainly encourage our listeners to go there. I just before I wrap us up, the you I think that's a really important reminder, and I'm grateful for that, that you're not stuck with your brain, and that, neuroplasticity means that we can start again. But you said you can change all your habits or something like that. But that, I think the reminder for someone like me is don't try and burn everything down and start again all at once. Not that you said that, but this idea, and certainly a theme of this conversation, has been remove the block from the very start of it and just kind of do the smallest thing. But is it just a reflection that it's important for us to start with one area of our life if there's a habit that we'd like to embed, or one miniature version of a habit rather than a bit of a life overhaul?
oh yeah. I mean, our brains are only capable of changing up to three things at one time. And
Mm,
research shows that just changing one thing at a time is much more effective than trying to change multiple things. Again, because
mm,
changing things takes effort and energy. And so
yes.
I would just focus on one teeny tiny change. And when that starts to feel more automatic and more habitual and more, I guess, natural, then you can pick
Hmm.
another one up, but don't do it all at the one time.
Yeah. And that's the whole problem with the January New Year, New Me,
Yes,
sort of messaging, isn't it? That you would eat well and exercise more and have these kind of big, lofty, unspecified habits, and then the 15th of January feel like a complete failure
totally.
because for all the reasons that you've spoken about, our brain just does not support, this sort of all or nothing, and lack of specificity, I suppose, too, around something like get healthy, get
Mm,
fit, eat better.
yeah.
Yeah, so just a reminder of the sort of the tiniest, maybe most lowest hanging fruit as a start, and then, getting those practices embedded, getting the positive feedback loop, And then, as you say, once it becomes habitual, so once there's a settled tendency there, maybe try something else. Yeah, thank you for helping us with that distinction. Gina, this has been a hugely beneficial conversation for me, and obviously I know my listeners will gain a huge amount. So again, I would direct everybody to Gina's excellent work, which I'll link in the show notes. And a thank you for all of the generosity of your time and knowledge today, Gina.
Of course, my pleasure, Bree. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Habit Nerd. I hope you found some new inspiration, learned something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you did enjoy the episode, I would be really grateful if you could please leave a 5-star review, as it helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it should only take you 5 seconds. If you're keen for more tips and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow Habit Nerd.